You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's episode of a former U.S. Army member who has a story of survivor's guilt that he's pivoted and turned into his own business and an eventual book. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment. Really want to thank you guys for getting on top of our Amazon promotion. I'm starting to see some major traction there. So please continue to do so. Go to our website, hazardground.com. Click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage, and it'll redirect you to Amazon. You can do all of your normal Amazon shopping. We get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we'll donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the show. So it's a great way to give back to veterans and veterans organizations all across America just by going to hazardground.com first. Also works on your smartphone, really easy and convenient. It'll redirect you to the app. So if you save your credit card information, all that stuff, it's an easy way to go help out and donate to veterans charities right through Hazard Ground. But again, you got to go to hazardground.com first. Please continue to follow us on other social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast, and leave the Apple reviews. We get all of them. I see all of them, and I certainly appreciate all the kind words, but leave a 5-star review. Tell us why you love the show. Help grow the Hazard Ground community. It's an algorithm. It's the internet. I don't know what it is. I'm really not smart enough to know what it is, but I do know that the more Apple reviews you leave, the more love we get, and the more they push the show towards the top of podcast on Apple. So we certainly appreciate it. And wherever you get the show, please give us a thumbs up and tell us why you love this show. We certainly appreciate it. All right. This week's guest spent a total of 8 years in the United States Army between active duty and the National Guard. He was medically discharged in 2008 as an E5 sergeant. He had one deployment to Iraq in 2005 as well. He is also a writer for Havoc Journal, which we've talked a lot about on the show. Our good buddy Charlie Faith, who runs the Havoc Journal, certainly it puts together some great work, and he and I have a great relationship going forward. So Havoc Journal, I was check them out as well. And he's working on a book called Resolute Path. Currently, he is the founder and owner of Hybrid Wolf Blue Line Strategies, a veteran-owned training and consultant company. To share his story here about his survivor's guilt and what happened to him, he is Ayman Kafel joining us here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Ayman, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. I truly appreciate it.
So I came across your story on Havoc Journal, and again, I text Charlie immediately. I said, I need this, like it's in written word, and there's some really, on Havoc Journal, it's written, but there's some very detailed pictures and very, poignant things that you'll see. And I recommend you guys go check it out on havocjournal.com because it's certainly worth it. But I just wanted to hear it in your words because it's something I think that resonates with a lot of our audience, the idea of survivor's guilt and what you do with it and how you move on from it and how much it carries you. And we'll get to all the details of what had happened in Iraq in 2005 first. But we start at the beginning. How and why did you get in the Army?
So I was part of the generation after September 11th. I was on my way to college, doing the typical college things. Then sure enough, we get attacked. And I'll never forget, each of us have our own stories of September 11th. And, I'll never forget going back home, watching TV and seeing all the destruction and mass casualty that went on. And immediately, I've always wanted to join the military, even as a kid growing up. But this sort of propelled me, especially more now after the attack. And it wasn't just because also the attack, it's also what I survived as a kid, growing up in 2 different countries, 2 different civil wars between Monrovia and Lebanon, and then eventually coming to the United States in 1988. So I saw so much, I had so much connection with that. And I was like, oh no, this is not coming home, essentially. Well, because the US is my home. And I said I wasn't going to allow it to come home. And that's why I joined. And the other reason I joined is because I'm Lebanese. I speak fluent Arabic. And I felt that I needed to go over there to basically get the bad ones out of there.
I mean, I want to try to tread delicately here, but I guess I kind of, as somebody who is from the Middle East originally and everything else, I mean, when all this goes down, how conflicted are you? I mean, you have this patriotism, love, and pride in America, but obviously your home is your home and where you grew up, and the bad people in that region of the world, and not everybody is bad. I'm not painting a broad stroke, but I guess it's no different from us, school shooters or whatever. Those are bad people, right? And they're Americans and they're in America, and we'd love to get rid of them too. Is it as easy as that to say that, those people are not reflective of society as a whole, and you just kind of want to eradicate them?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, as the wars progressed and as brutal as they were, I'm talking about the enemy, as brutal as they were, it was not reflective of the way I grew up, what I saw. The common person overseas, unfortunately, is so much oppression. Which that's one thing in America that I always talk about is how fortunate the citizens are that are not oppressed like they were or they are in the Middle East, and how they live day by day in that fear that big government is at any point can come after you, lock you up for no reason, or for speaking your mind, and your family will never see you again, and that's the thing where, to me, that's not reflective of society, the society that I know of in whether it be Lebanon, Monrovia, because in the end, every human on earth wants freedom. That's inherently in our in our blood.
Yep.
So that's kind of like my philosophy and rationale of I can separate the two. When I was over there, I knew who were the bad ones. I knew who were the good ones.
Yeah, and again, it's funny. I can remember, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but like talking with my interpreter, who was Palestinian but born in Iraq. He was of Palestinian descent, born in Iraq. And I remember him having this uncanny ability of looking at him and going, "That's a bad guy."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, how do you know? And I look at him like crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? Or he'd be like, "Nope, he's okay." He's go, "How do you know? How do you he's like, "Trust me, sir. I know." I'm like, "Okay." If I die, I'm pissed though. There's, I've got years of training and everything else, and you want me to rely on your gut. I've known you for about 4 months, and I'm supposed to rely on your gut that all is going to be okay. It sort of flies in the face of everything that I was brought up to believe here in the military. But nonetheless, it was just, I don't know. I've never had anything like that. Like I can't walk down the street in America and go, "That's a good guy and that's a bad guy." But it's a sort of unique thing about your culture, about the Middle Eastern culture. It's just, I don't know if you get a sixth sense. Does it smell different? I can't explain it, but you guys got it.
Yeah, that's it. I can't explain it myself, where I can literally, I'll never forget walking through a couple villages, doing my thing, collecting intel or whatever I'm doing. And I just know, it's like something clicks in the back of my head, and I'm just like, that I don't like that. I'll never forget, again, jumping ahead a little bit, with my battalion commander, we went far north. I think we were in Kirkuk at the time, and he was visiting a detention center, an Iraqi detention center. And we were walking through and being part of his PSD, personal security detail, at the time, walking through, and he had IPs all around him. We were talking, chit-chatting, and all I was doing was listening, because at the time there was also another interpreter that was assigned to him, right? So when that happens, I was sort of used as, okay, you're like the wolf in sheep's clothing, just hang back, and if you see something or hear something, act on it. I was like, perfect. So there are times where I didn't really talk, I just listened, and just be that mole, so to speak, be that wolf, like they described me, be that wolf, just kind of standing by. And I remember this plainclothes guy was walking in between us, and just something did not sit well with me with that. And sure as hell, he reached behind his back. I smelled his back. I'll never forget. It was a Glock. And I scream at him, and raise my M16 and scream at him in Arabic. And he's like, everyone froze, because one, they didn't realize I spoke Arabic. Two, they have a U.S. soldier in full battle rattle about to hose down this one unknown, an unknown threat that I perceived. And he dropped his gun and proned him out, the whole 9 yards. But that's kind of like that sixth sense, as you described, like just something didn't sit right. And I just knew that was a bad dude.
Wow, your BC must have loved you that day.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, and just for some context, anybody who's ever worked day in and day out with an interpreter, and I had the fortunate pleasure of doing it, and I say pleasure in retrospect because Bubba, as you like to be called, he was a 23, 24-year-old kid, educated, but just wanted to come and help out. And the money was great, right? The money was great for interpreters who wanted to come and help out the United States. But in that same respect, again, I'm putting a whole lot of faith and trust in somebody I don't know. I don't know their background. All I know is they were handed to me and vetted by
exactly.
that said that they're on the good side, right? And I can only imagine your battalion commander, that's a really smart way to use you. Exactly the way, just don't say anything, don't do anything, don't let anybody know you speak a foreign language. Just listen. And because it's, again, my interpreter I never thought was against me, but there were so many people who were moles and everything else. And I could tell story after story, but I don't need to. But, again, we had plenty of indications of bad guys pretending to be good guys just to get information. We started finding them out one by one. And you always just had to wonder in the back of your mind, I'm like, could he be swayed? Could he be on the other side? Is there a way, if somehow they found out, if the bad guys found out and then got somebody in his family, now all of a sudden he's in that position that so many good people in Iraq ended up being in who wanted to help Americans, right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to kill you. We're going to go kill your family if you don't do this for us, kind of deal.
Well, that's kind of what was found out kind of in my brigade, the brigade and the battalion, where I was also loaned out to various units as a not just as interpreter, as an intel gatherer, also as a soldier. Here you have a U.S. soldier vetted from America, speaks fluent. Yeah. So every unit that I ever worked with was like, again, they're extremely comfortable, obviously, because I got a U.S. soldier that has a full battle rattle and can call in airstrikes if needed. I could take care of business if it really came down to it. And at the time, as young as I was, right, I was 21, 22 when I actually went to war. And thinking about it years later, I'm like, holy crap, as a 21, 22-year-old, I had this massive responsibility that I didn't even think of it at the time, because I was just going, planning the ops with the battalion commander, doing this, doing that, talking to high level, Iraqis and high generals. And it didn't really occur to me that the effects-based operations that was going on in my AO was based on a lot of the intel I was gathering. And it didn't really dawn on me until years later,
I mean, again, it's just unreal. And for other non-military folks listening and watching, just the context of your interpreters, they're given like a Kevlar and like a small little, piece of body armor, but they look uncomfortable, right? So to have somebody in full battle rattle who can be able to do that, at least for the enemy, they're not expecting it. So they know what the interpreters look like. They stick out like sore thumbs. Anyway, back up. So you sign up in a post 9/11 world, and how quickly do you get through basic AIT and then into Iraq? Like, how quick does this happen?
About a year and a half by the time. So I enlisted. I went in 2002. I did what I ended up doing was a delayed entry program. That way I can finish my semester in college and then then I go to basic out at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a beautiful Fort Sill. So went out there. Yeah, right. So I did my basic and AIT all together. So I did OSUT, so one station unit training, I think it was. So I did OSUT at the time, and spent 3.5 months at lovely Fort Sill, and then came home, and a year later we got mobbed for Iraq.
Okay, and so when you went to later, you were National Guard the whole way, right?
Yeah. National Guard. I went National Guard, and then at the time, when obviously the wars were kicking off in Massachusetts, it seemed that almost every combat arms National Guard unit was being rotated every year. So you come back home a year, then you redeploy a year, come back home a year. So that's kind of like, that's the way the I guess the battle rhythm in Massachusetts was every other year you're going.
Yeah, the Guard units were, I mean, still to this day being pressed more than they ever have in the history.
Yeah.
So, and it's different conversation, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed. You either need to change the slogan and the campaign, the recruiting strategy of 1 weekend a month.
That went out the window after September 11th. I said that. I'm like, hey, this is not 1 weekend a month. We were doing weeks at a time, not even 1 weekend a month.
My ass is what.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, again, different conversation. Either you need to change that whole idea if that's what you're pitching to people, or you need to go back to leaving the guard alone and only use them when absolutely needed as a literal last line of defense, because that's exactly what they're intended to be.
Exactly.
That we need to start rewriting some very old documents. But again, okay. So when do you get when do you get notification from MOB? What are you told? Where are you going? What are you doing?
So during one of our extended ATs out of Fort Drum, we were there for about a month. You're talking, this is August of, even before then, like July, we started, July of 2004, we started hearing rumblings like, oh, hey, our number's up, we're going to deploy. I was actually going to deploy, let me back up real quick. I was going to deploy at the invasion. They were asking for Guard members who wanted to go for the invasion of Iraq in 2003 when it kicked off. And I was slotted to go, but Murphy's Law, I ended up tearing my ACL, MCL, and I couldn't go. So I had to wait a whole year basically to rehab and all that stuff. And then, July of 2004, we started hearing the rumblings, and we get the orders August of 2004, and we were at Fort Dix like September of 2004.
How long was the train up?
It was till December. Yeah, 90 days. It was 90 days, not till December, and then we went over. So it was like I always laugh. I tell people, I'm like, yeah, they on paper it's 1 year, but the reality is it's anywhere between 15 to 18 months.
Yeah, and that's I was one of the things I was most proud of. Both of my deployments, I got in and out of that MOB station in about 35 days. There's no reason for us to just get us downrange. The sooner we start this shit, the sooner it'll be over.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, we've already done this. Check the block. We've already done this. Check the block.
Exactly.
So I fought tooth and nail, to not, because I knew it could be a 90-day slog. If you didn't push the envelope, they would just la-di-da-di-da-di-da. I'm like, no, la-di-da-di. Let's go. The sooner we start this, the sooner we're getting the hell out of here. So
exactly.
So that's crazy, because I got to Iraq in March 2005, late March, early April 2005. So when did you end up getting there?
So December we fly to Kuwait, and then we stay an additional 3 weeks. Yeah, additional 3 weeks in Kuwait. Just like
the worst place on earth.
Exactly. And I'm like, why are we still here? Like we were all itching, obviously, like, dude, get us across the border and let's go. So we ended up finally, January 2005, sort of officially, like right after New Year's, we landed in Camp Anaconda.
And oh, by the way, the other part of that whole thing is when, just for people listening, with the long, pre-MOB, and then you get in Kuwait, all that adds up to for a guy like me as a commander is paperwork, because dudes get in trouble because they're freaking bored. Like bad things happen when you leave soldiers idle and don't give them continual crap to do. So that's the reason I was pushing so hard. It was as much as it was about let's start this so we can finish. It was like if we hang around here, something stupid's going to happen.
Yeah, so, it's true.
I'm shocked if that didn't happen to you guys, I'd be surprised.
Well, the NCOs were very hard on everybody. Us NCOs, we made sure people were in line, and we kept them training, and for good reason. So,
where do you end up in Iraq?
So we get to Camp Anaconda. We start there, and Balad, and I'll never forget when we. You remember the combat drops when the C-130 goes from like 20,000 feet to land. I'll never forget that. Exactly, the corkscrew down.
Corkscrew landing.
And,
where you just turn green. You're like laying against the wall, and like I just want to throw up. Yeah.
Well, what's funny is, funny not funny, I was asleep during that flight, and no one woke me up to tell me that we were landing. Yeah. So I thought we were crashing, and you see I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And so they're like, no,
It's
we're
just because I
combat, we're up.
understand. Yeah, I only laugh because I understand what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we finally land and half the unit is throw up bags. They actually, the flight crew was nice enough not to wake me up, just left me a throw up bag on my lap. That was really nice of them to not disturb me. So half the guys were throwing up, and we get out, and the first thing was, we get in formation and head towards the big tent, kind of like to start our mob. And I found it kind of funny because you take your CAT card and you sign into war. And that's what I call it. You just swipe and I'm checked in.
checked into combat. Well, 12 months.
Exactly.
Inshallah, as they say. And I remember when we did the first, we landed at night. I don't know if you guys did, but
we did at night. Yeah, it was at night.
You can see tracer rounds flying past the windows.
That's exactly what again, I thought we were crash landing. I thought we got hit. Like, I had no idea what was going on. So once I realized, guys are telling me, oh, we're doing the combat drop. I'm like, you motherfucking, like, you should have woke me up. I had no idea. But anyway, so yeah, we check in, land and all that. And we stayed on Anaconda again, freaking hurry up and wait, right? We stay on Anaconda an additional week. Motor City, mortars hitting us every single day, where I'm sure you guys were the same way. Eventually, you just don't care anymore. If the mortars go over your head, you kind of wait, okay, it's far enough, not too worried. You kind of get desensitized to it. But the unit,
the ones that land danger close.
Yeah, exactly. And once, I forget which unit came and picked us up, but picked us up. This would be my first outside the wire experience, so I had no idea what to expect, when we went outside the wire.
All right. So you guys convoy from Balad to wherever you're going?
Yeah. So where we were was north of the city of Kalis, probably by 15, 20 miles. We were on a remote fob, which was nice. So that way we didn't have the issues of mortars really. So it was actually nice to be on a remote fob.
Okay. And trying to think of Kalis from Balad. What are we talking about time wise?
About 45 minutes, if I remember correctly, like just about an hour just about.
Okay. And the only, once you get out of Balad, it's actually not that bad.
No, it's not.
Like the scenery around it and the area around it. So, while you're getting mortared on the inside, it's not that bad of a ride. But you guys were actually near Bakuba too, right? Up in that area?
Yeah. Up in that's the area we were in.
All right. And again, I'm trying to just orient it for the audience. If Baghdad is let's just call it New York City. Bakuba is like Westchester County. Like, it's not that far away. It's up that way. So, the difference probably from like Sacramento to San Francisco kind of deal. Anyway.
Yeah.
So when you get there, what are you told? Do you have a specific area of operations you're working in? Like So there was like 3 separate missions on this fob that each unit was assigned. And we were assigned, my unit was assigned detainee ops, which we kind of like, oh, okay, here we go. So we went to do detainee ops, and that's what they ended up doing. But I obviously did not do that at all. Once the battalion commander realized that he had an Arabic speaking soldier, which was about a week and a half later, Arabic speaking soldier, he's like, yep, plucked, took me out and assigned me direct to the battalion commander. Did that bother you?
No, I actually wanted to get out there, to do it. To actually, I was itching to go outside the wire. It was one of those things where I'm like, I wanted that specific mission to be out there with the soldiers.
So this is, late January, you get your feet on the ground. I mean, the incident that we referred to earlier for you doesn't happen until September.
Yeah.
So obviously, what's like the steady state of operation? What's your operational tempo as you kick this thing off? I mean, the battalion obviously wants to be everywhere and do everything, right? I mean,
Our battalion commander was a very proactive one. Okay, he wasn't. I know there were some battalion commanders that were sort of reactive. He wanted to be more proactive, and we ended up knocking. So IED strikes and ambushes skyrocketed downwards under his command as a result of the proactiveness. The proactive approach he had towards our AO. And his biggest thing. I mean, I'll never forget some of his speeches. I mean, he was quite the guy that you want to run into battle with. He was that type of commander. And one of his thing, I'll never forget one of his speeches. He would to the battalion during so every Friday night there'd be a battalion that he called it Fight Night. It was a boxing ring we built, and it was actually pretty genius on his part that if you have a beef with another soldier, take it out on the ring and settle it there. So it was actually pretty decent idea on his part. But every Friday night, if he's around, he'll do a speech. And one of his biggest things was he'd always say, if you see something, you fucking kill it. Like he said, do not hesitate. Do not let complacency set in. Get after it. And he always told, the gunners, everybody, like, your posture should be aggressive. You should not be laid back. You should not be. So it was, we kind of put a very, very good stamp in our AO that we're the type of battalion you don't want to mess with.
Okay. How much actual combat did you see leading up to September?
So,
I mean, because in reality, the battalion commander is like the last guy to the combat party, so to speak. Unless on the off chance you get hit directly while you're going somewhere, it's always other troops are in contact and you're playing catch.
Yeah. So actual combat, there's been times where, again, Colonel being the battalion commander, we've had to rein him in sometimes because he loves to go into the fight. And there were times where he would be my number two going through a frickin' door. And I'd realize it's him. I'm like, okay, So actual combat, I mean, it was a small percentage because, in fact, it was a battalion commander, but it was enough to kind of keep us on our toes also at the same time. Because
as you're going through this, like you were saying, hey, I'm itching to get outside the wire. I mean, and like a month or two into this, you realize, nothing happens around the BC.
Yeah.
Like, are you pissed now at this point in time? You're like, what am I doing? This sucks. Why am I here?
Well, at first, yes. But then when I realized, again, like years later, when I realized what I was actually doing, I kind of adopted a lot of UW type approaches, a lot of intel, especially when special forces came around, the AO, and I'd work with them and do some stuff with them and other units, God knows who, but they'd come to me for intel, and I had such the pulse of the entire AO that we worked. I knew what villages were friendly, what villages weren't, who were the high value targets, who were getting ambushed, where the ambushes were happening, who was moving troops, Al-Qaeda troops around. So I knew, just through talking, just through intel gathering. And again, like I said,
did it ever like freak you out? Like all of a sudden, you're in this unconventional warfare mindset, like, there's UW unconventional warfare mindset where you're like, what am I even doing here? Like, this is what I trained. This is not what I signed up. Like, I'm not that guy. Like we have people who do this stuff and it's not me.
Yeah, no, it was kind of funny because I tell people, oh yeah, I have, field artillery. But then when I describe my deployment, they're like, well, yeah, it's not field artillery at all. I'm like, I know, I got trained in Fort Sill to not even do the job.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Again, it happens. It happens in the special ops world. That's where my first deployment was, and I say it all the time. I was asked to do 100 things that I wasn't even remotely close to being trained to do. Period.
Yeah,
like it wasn't me, but hey, in the fight, right?
Yeah.
So it's going along, and you're starting to realize the depth and the scope of where we are holistically. And I wonder. Let me go deep here on you for a minute.
Yeah.
You grew up in a country, or you grew up in countries where civil war and war were a way of life. Like it was a way to get things done. The physical extension of politics and diplomacy in those countries sometimes is only shown through violence.
Yeah.
Is there part of you that, understanding the complex nature of where you are in Iraq and knowing all this information about where things are, Is there any part of you that in the back of your mind is like, this is hopeless? Or are you like, hey, we might have a shot to actually win this thing? Like, what are you thinking? Because I remember having those conversations with myself. Like, this is a waste of damn time. Even if I survive this is a waste of damn time.
So my, again, really deep dive, right? I knew we were there. Wasn't going to change much though, because you have, again, me knowing the culture, thousands of years of hate between each other.
That ain't going away in 18 months.
That 200-300-year-old America is not going to fix. Mm-hmm. And I would talk to these, village elders and the mayors and all that. And they're talking about stuff that happened hundreds of years ago. Yep. That they still have that anger towards the neighboring village or the neighboring sect. And it was never about, and that's the thing, I'm sure we've all seen the videos of, commanders yelling at the IPs to be like, when are you going to fight for your country? And which I used to yell at them that way, except mine was in Arabic and a lot harsher. and I used to say, I'm like, look at my squad. And I was like, we're mixed. Like, you have a guy from the Middle East, you got a guy from Africa, you got a guy from Japan, you got this, you got that. I said, you go into my unit, you have every creed, color, religion in that unit fighting for the same thing, whether it's fighting for each other, to finish the mission, all that. And that's what I used to say. I said, you need to take all your groups and fight for Iraq, not fight for this sect or that sect or this sect of the religion or that's it. But again, to them, they didn't understand that because they still lived in those medieval times.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And I can remember my interpreter, saying to me behind it, we'd be in meetings with literally the Iraqi Army, like people in the Iraqi Army, and two officers would be fighting, and he would lean, oh, he's a Sunni. That's why he's
yeah.
Like he would lean over and tell me that, and so they don't like each other because one's Sunni and one's Shia, and you're sitting there going, really? Like,
yeah,
we're still doing this. Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'll never forget a interpreter that I actually met and worked with a number of times. He was Assyrian, and even though technically he was Iraqi, he refused to acknowledge he was Iraqi. He said, "No, I'm Assyrian." I was like, "I am not Iraqi. I hate Iraqis. I'm Assyrian." I used to tell him like, then what, really? I was like, that's just, that mindset. Like I understand that mindset too, but at the same time, I'm the type like, well, time to grow out of it, and like, let's move forward. But they don't know how to do that,
Again, I said repeatedly, you're not going to change 2,000 years of culture in 18 months or 2 years or 5 years, or it's just not going to, it doesn't work that way. Let's just put this in simple terms, that Americans can understand. Let's see, we got here in the mid 1600s. It took us about 125 years to fight a war with Britain, where we finally said, okay, we've had enough of this shit. Like, so good. We're 20 years into this. So, just about another century down, Iraq could be like, screw it, we're all together.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing like, as you would understand, Arabs are very punctual on time, inshallah.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly.
I remember saying that to my guys, and no, inshallah, be there at 1500. I just told you.
Yeah, exactly.
God has nothing to do with this. Get your ass in the meeting.
Yeah, so true.
Those are fun times. All right, so you're going through the deployment. Is there any point prior to September where you experience something that kind of rattles you, whether it's physically, like, oh my God, I feared for my life, or at least emotionally, you stumble upon something you didn't expect to see?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things, during my deployment, you just see, executed Iraqis, all over the streets, whether they were interpreters or specifically targeted, especially, I'll never forget, we were on a mission. Again, my battalion commander, very, very aggressive, where he'll wake up the entire PSD at 1 at 0100, 0 dark 30, because we got intel that we need to go somewhere and he wants to go. I'm like, all right, let's go. And because he wanted to be first on the ground. But, we were on our way back from Baghdad. We had a specific mission. I forget exactly what it is. And I'll never forget looking outside my window. We see an Iraqi who was executed, and the IP checkpoint, not even 50 yards from him. Now, safe to assume that the IPs executed him for some reason, and they left his body out for display. right? And all of us kind of collectively wanted to do something about it, right? Whether go to the IPs and see what that, or just freaking take care of business our way. And I'll never forget. A commander goes, battalion commander says, "Hey guys, stay on azimuth. We got somewhere we need to be. I know what you're thinking, but stay on azimuth." And for people that don't know, you know what stay on azimuth, and military guys know stay on azimuth. Basically it's the compass we use as azimuth, and when we say to stay on course, basically. And we drove by, and it there was certain little things here and there that, children suffering, that's always the worst. After a bombing, you're picking up, kids that were hurt. Just those tiny things that just lead up to big situations where, you're driving through Mosul and shots are being fired, and you're trying to move through, right, and push through, and you just see the carnage, the after carnage of everything once, so-called the dust settles, and you see more civilians hurt because the Al-Qaeda operatives would use them as human shields purposely, where we've seen it where you can't go into a mosque because, again, NATO rules and Geneva Convention, but they knew that, and they would use that against us. So there's like just compounded things that you see that you're just like, God damn, this is real. This is real war. This is what real war looks like. And that's what I always tell people, like, it's not glorious. There's not, it's not a Hollywood. It's not this movie, that goes. It's real emotion, real anger, real, revenge type feelings that you'd feel, especially when it leads up to September. At that time, we were really getting to that point of aggression, right? It was like one thing after another. And even even though we were the battalion commander's PSD, we also had the ability to go outside the wire ourselves without the BC, at times where he was too busy doing battalion commander stuff. And we just kind of like, hey, you guys want to go out for a bit? Yeah, well, let's go. We, whether we get intel and we want to act on it or whatever, we were free to do that too. So it's just a lot of things that I got to see on both sides that really kind of shook me over time, if you want to call it that.
The depravity of war, in the macro sense, is incomprehensible to people who haven't been there.
Yeah.
When you see, mangled body parts and explosions and everything else and destruction, and those vivid images stay with you for a really, really long time. There's no escaping that. And it's crazy because I want to ask you this, because it just sort of made me pivot. There are moments in war of such like levity and peace. I mean, I can remember playing with Iraqi children, stumbling upon them, then running up to the vehicle, giving them candy and everything else. I remember going to visit an Iraqi school, and handing out school supplies, and every now and then you just bump into citizens and you have pleasant exchanges and everything else. And it seems so normal.
Yeah.
But you're sitting for almost for a minute, you forget you're in full battle rattle, and there's Kevlar and a rifle, and there's grenades here and flashbangs and everything else. And there's a knife in your pocket, and but in the same respect, you're just sitting there like you're two hard hat guys, having a sandwich at lunch while you're waiting to go back to work. It's just this weird dichotomy. And as much as there is the bad stuff, there is the good stuff. You encounter any of that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, under that UW sort of mindset I had, I'd go to the villages and we'd sit down and have breakfast, like, tea, eggs. I'd take my Kevlar off, and we're not talking about anything other than just life philosophies. Not even really engaging in any. I wasn't even really intending on engaging on any sort of intel type gathering. That came after, which I'm sure you've experienced this, where, in these village meetings or whatever, you could spend an hour or so just shooting the shit before you actually get into business, because one, they want to get to know you and your philosophies before they even give you any sort of information. So for me, it was like a twofer bit where they really wanted to know why I'm doing what I'm doing, right?
Mhm.
Especially being a guy from the Middle East and living, born overseas and at home. They really wanted to dive into the curiosity of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And like you said, though, I forget that I'm wearing full IBA. I got the grenades, the full battle, the 8 magazines across my chest. I got my rifle. I got all this gear, that I'm, rucking around in. And though those moments, you feel like you can just chill a little bit, not be that hyper vigilance that you always were, because you're actually having a decent conversation with another human being. Where the two sides, you're not worried about, is he bad, is he good, is
There's
he
a
this?
depravity, but there's a
Yeah,
humanity to it,
yeah, exactly.
sometimes it's a very thin line between the two of them, you
Yes, yeah,
and it almost makes you emotionally on one hand, it's almost like bad because you don't want to get emotionally involved in combat. It's never,
yeah, yeah,
unless it's about the dudes you're with and the folks, the males and the females that you're with. Um, you don't want to get emotionally attached to anything
yeah,
because it's a difficult place to be. Because as your battalion commander said, that hesitation sometimes could be the difference between life and death for you or somebody else.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's a bad way to get into it. So you have this full-on combat experience. Had you guys lost any people within the battalion yet that you were aware of
So
prior to September?
prior to September, no, we haven't. We had lost people in the brigade. We lost soldiers that I remember this big transportation unit coming through. I think they were part of the 82nd. They got hit bad, complex ambush, daisy chain IEDs with a firefight, and we went up to back them up. And we called in Kiowas, which I love. That's a whole different conversation with those guys. But we call those guys in. We do what we got to do, and again, once the dust settles, it's that aftermath, that realization, where it's like, holy shit, like especially seeing the daisy chain IED where all these trucks got mangled, and getting now, we had to be the ones to kind of snap them out of that zone where you know how it is. You get this, you get some soldiers that freeze. It happens, right? That's just natural human response, depending on how your mindset is and who you are. You get the soldiers that are just delirious walking around after the dust settles. And I remember me as an NCO, I grabbed one of the Kevlar, the IBAs for one of the privates, and literally slammed him up against the piece of armor, and I said, "Hey, stay the fuck here," like stay here. And I was trying to get him to snap out of whatever he was in to get him back into that. Okay, we got work to do, and once we load up, I mean, it was a huge convoy, big transportation convoy, and we had to turn them all around and take them back to our fob to get them refit, resupplied, food, whatever they needed to get back on mission for them. And the one thing I'll never forget is being out front in front of that convoy, walking and telling all the Iraqis to move. You know how it is. You got to, all right, move, because you got to. I had about I believe 50 to 75 truck convoy. It was a large convoy of transportation, and not once did I think that. Well, I had it in my head. These could be bad guys. In these trucks, there might be a V-bid hidden in here somewhere. Like, it was just bad, but it was just me and a major. And I was talking, doing my thing in Arabic, move. And later on, I'm like, wow, I was out in the middle of the road. I was a prime target, man, but at the time, again, I was asked once, did you ever think of that stuff? Did you fear that stuff? Did you do this? I said, well, if I was in fear of everything, I wouldn't leave the fob. If I had to think of it that way.
Well, again, sometimes there's a we say this all, your training kicks in, right? Like,
Yeah.
And the idea of, okay, we have a mission to do, we got to move these people out of the way because we got to keep going forward. Your own personal safety and basic things of hey, don't stand out in the middle of an area by yourself. Sort of goes out the window under the guise of, hey, I'm getting this done so we can get moving.
Yeah.
Sometimes the worst action is inaction, right? Even though you're safe and protected, you might staying in the vehicle. Sometimes is a worse option for everybody involved than necessarily getting out there and making things happen, because Sometimes the enemy is unaware of what is going on around them as you are, and you can take
Yeah.
advantage of it if you move and move quickly.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, so relatively you've been unscathed. Everything has sort of been on the periphery. But then we get to September 20th, 2005.
Yeah.
Is this a normal day when you wake up? I mean, does it seem like a routine set of marching orders you're getting?
Pretty much, we get together with the other squad. So just for context, the other squad, actually, let me bring this up real quick. We just found out that one of the guys of the squad recently got a Distinguished Service Cross.
Wow.
This squad was legitimate. They had quite the time in Iraq. Their Sergeant Leigh Hester, the only female to get a Silver Star.
Oh, wow.
Since World War II, she was in that squad, and they were the 617 MP company. Staff Sergeant Timothy Nine received the Distinguished Service Cross. It was actually March 20, 2005, where they were escorting a supply convoy and got heavily attacked. And they took care of business, and she did a lot. He did a lot, and I'm actually proud. They got she got the Silver Star, and he got the Distinguished Service Cross. So that's the caliber of guys that were in that squad that we were marching with that day. And so at the time they were assigned as QRF for the base, right? So we wanted to go with them. We had sort of a marching orders where we were going to do kind of a split the squad up. Her squad, Sergeant Hester's squad, would go one direction, and we go another direction, and sort of meet back in the middle after we do what we do, whether it's talking to villagers or doing our patrols, stuff like that. So we mount up, get ready to go. Everyone locks and loads. We're ready. We're good to go, and we start heading out. For some reason, last minute, over the Singars, you hear, hey, actually, you know what? We'll go right. You guys go left. All right, whatever. Yeah, roger that. We changed the course. And not even a few minutes later, that's when you hear the nine-line medevac. And you hear the chaos in the background of the Singars. And we realize they were hit. And we get there. And I remember we just raced as fast as we can there. At the time, Sergeant Hester was calling in the medevac, and we had Apaches and Kiowas in the area en route. So for me, as I was in the battalion commander's gun truck, we pull up and we see Sergeant Allers, who was KIA, Sergeant Allers' truck, completely blown to bits, mangled. And the reason why, it was 3 155 artillery shells. That was the IED. And you know how powerful those are. And imagine 3 of them wrapped in an IED. So we pull up, and I'll never forget seeing one of the soldiers open the rear door and stumble out. He was black, from the smoke, just completely black.
From that same vehicle.
Yes, from that same vehicle. Completely covered in black. And I remember the colonel looks at me and says, hey, Sarge, I need to be able to talk to the air assets, and I need to talk to the battalion talk. Set up the radio. And that's that moment, one of the many moments where my training kicked in out of nowhere. And, you feel that out-of-body experience where you're pushing the buttons, turning the knobs, but you're not really. Like, I'm not physically, like all of a sudden my mind just went, doing my thing. And that's one thing the colonel, like during the AR debrief, he said, Sarge, that was awesome how quickly you were able to get my radio situated. And in my head, I'm like, dude, I didn't do anything. Like okay, if that's what I did. But I don't even remember setting up the frequency hops, the frequency specific frequency. Like, it was all in my head, because again, like training, we ingrained that stuff in the back of our head. That way, in moments of crisis, that training that sits in our, cerebellum, our amygdala, all that brain, primal brain function, come to the forefront, because you're doing reps after reps after reps. And I just did that. And then once he got situated, I get out and start helping with casualties and perimeter. So the Black Hawk lands, the medevac Black Hawk lands. We ended up setting up the landing zone for it to get a good spot for it to land. It landed, and I was working with the crew chief to get the litters out, and got a bunch of litters, a couple litters out, and I run over to the gun truck with one of the crew chiefs. I remember Sergeant Hester. She was furious that her litter wasn't opening. I'll never forget, she threw it literally across like the way, and grabbed what we had and rushed it over to where Allers was. And his body was mangled. Like, just, we knew he was KIA. No one would survive that, And
he was the driver again?
No, he was actually the truck commander. Passenger. Yep. And that's where it hit, directly on the passenger, right under him, where it hit.
Yeah.
Extensive wounds with the gunner. The driver, he was physically okay, but again, he was one of those.
I don't know how.
Yeah, I really don't know how either, because we had to physically restrain him.
Like the front half of the vehicle is essentially missing.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know how. I remember we had to physically restrain him, or the squad had to physically restrain him because he was in a dangerous spot where he was exposed. And, we didn't know what other enemies were out there, if they were. So we had to literally physically restrain him and put him down near one of our gun trucks to keep him safe. And, you can hear the screams and the screaming, his screaming, after we load up Sergeant Allers and the gunner, who was also wounded, medevac took off, and the rest of the MPs, the 617th. I don't remember exactly where. I think they just went back to the FOB, but we stayed at the time because CID was coming out, because there was a very specific bomber that got trained by Chechnyan that had a signature on every IED he made. And that was one of the IEDs. So they wanted to come out to collect that evidence. And we ended up just staying there, with the perimeter. And during that time, we started seeing body parts from Sergeant Allers. And then, myself and a couple other NCOs, we just walked around and collected body parts. Put them in a cooler right next to me.
What made you do that?
Everyone comes home, even the pieces. We wanted to make sure every part of them came back home, because that's something that we do. Leave no man behind, whether it's a body part or whatever. So we walked around, and one thing I'll never forget is picking up a large chunk of him. I mean, you're talking like probably this big, big chunk, maybe his thigh. I don't know what it was that I picked up, but it was pretty big. And I ended up grabbing some, we had random shit in the trunk of the gun truck. So I found magazine and used the magazine to kind of cover it up. That way I can pick it up and bring it over to the cooler. And, one of the sergeants started dry heaving because the smell, that burning flesh. I told him, hey, just take a walk. I'll take it, and placed it right in that cooler. And it was very surreal that day, just experiencing all that. There was so many emotions going on in us, and ultimately, in the end, it was that one of revenge. You just really killed one of ours, and now we want to get you.
You mentioned the screaming from the driver who was put down. Is that a noise that you were able to block out, or is it like one of those things where you kind of that stays with you, or it kind of bothered you that you heard him screaming, like to know that somebody was in that kind of pain?
I ended up blocking it out. I heard it, and then just kind of, okay, my guys are taking care of him because they're holding him down. But the echo of the screaming, I guess, is something I'll never forget. Just that screaming.
What is there part of it that you look at that? Because I look at that vehicle and I'm shocked that anybody survived. Given what was there. Did you think that, they had actually in some size, way, shape, or form had gotten like lucky that it was only one of them? Because I'm still in awe of the condition of that vehicle and how anybody walked away from that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those. I have no idea. One in a million type situations where it was only just the TC that got killed, and the rest wounded, and even like you said, the driver. I don't know how he got out unscathed.
By the time you are exfilling off the scene there, your battalion commander saying anything? I mean, you've presented this issue like he's very matter of fact, and he's going to follow the letter of the law of what needs to be done from a military standpoint, because there's a manual somewhere that says do this, do this, do this, do this, and doesn't show much emotion. Did he show any emotion at all?
No, he was very business also. Made sure the medevac. He wanted, again, like any real good commander, he made sure we were all on point still. Set up the perimeter, do this, do that, get this done, get that done, as we were there. But once it's settled, I remember seeing him in the distance. He was sitting on a mound, just quiet, kind of looking into the distance. And, we kind of just gave him his space, because we knew he was, at that point, the emotions were setting in, because we block them out as we're doing the job. But then afterwards, you and I both know they just come flooding back. Or they flood, because of what you suppressed during that time.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to him about the incident?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we still talk about it to this day.
So you still have a relationship with him?
Oh yeah, we're like close bonded, best friends.
Wow. Okay, good. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
We'll get to them later.
Yeah.
But I mean, while you were there on deployment, did you ever say anything to him like, "Hey, sir, you okay?"
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting with him was when he was with us, he was just another one of the guys. It was very interesting the way he was around us. We knew he was the battalion commander, but he also let the NCOs run it, right? We ran. It was our squad. We ran it, and he was just the passenger. Get me from point A to point B, but the NCOs ran it. And the only time he would step in is if it needs to be like at his level command decision. But 9 times out of 10, we were running the show, and that's just the way he was. He came from an NCO background before he became an officer, so he has a deep appreciation and love for the NCO Corps.
When does the weight of all this hit you? I mean, is it later that night? Is it the next day? Like when? Actually,
during the memorial, I'd say, we did the quick memorial. I kind of set in then. But at the same time, I didn't really allow it to set in really because I still had a job to do. I still had missions. It's one of those things where, you got a KIA, you do the memorial, now you're on to the next mission. You're on to the next task, especially at war. So I never really got a chance to process it till I got home.
Quick morbid question. The body parts you collected, I assume they ended up making it back where they needed to go?
Yeah, we made sure that happened. Went back with him,
Okay. So when does that deployment finish? You got there in January, so you had to be about by the end of the year. I mean, let me rephrase. After September, did anything else go completely haywire?
No. So we got back home after the new year, so January of 2006.
Okay.
And even actually before then, before I forget, we had another KIA, Sergeant Worley. It was during a combat operation where they hit an IED, and we rushed down to him, and he took shrapnel straight up underneath his chin, and he was still alive while the medics were working on him, and he was gasping for air. He couldn't breathe, and they were trying to do everything they can. From my understanding, he was alive all the way to the hospital table where he ended up finally dying because of the shrapnel scrambling in his head and all that. So we had 2 KIAs just towards the end of deployment, which leads to the whole, the curse. The last 2-3 weeks of deployment is always the worst because that's when, for some reason, it's just this curse, that just happens during the last month of your deployment where more soldiers are starting to get killed. And you're like, what is going on? And there's so many theories, complacency, can't wait to get home, all that stuff that happens. But that was, again, like I was still mission oriented, and it wasn't until I got home in January 2006 that everything really came flooding back.
Yeah, it is scary. Coincidentally enough, I mean, the worst IED explosion I was in was 8 days before I left. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
times just trying to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so you get back home. Now, as a guard member, you have this 90-day window where they leave you the hell alone, right? You're essentially left to your own devices. Am I accurate in assuming that, or no? At least that's the way it was for me.
So we get home, and we have a 2-week reintegration to society.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah,
which wasn't that at all. It was sitting with the VA. It was going through bullshit PowerPoints and never really assessing how the soldiers are. Especially the ones that were outside the wire, or even the ones doing detainee ops, of what they experienced, what happened. There was nothing like that, except we were told that if anyone has any issues, please tell us. We really want to help you, get back situated, but you got to stay on base during your treatment. Now,
what are you meaning?
Can't go home.
On base in your Massachusetts Guard unit?
No, at Fort Dix.
Okay. So you're still talking about at Fort Dix.
Yeah, Fort Dix. So
okay.
yeah,
I was moving forward to when you actually got back to the state of Massachusetts. But yes.
So
you get back to your demob site. I had the same thing at Fort Lewis the first time, Fort Dix the second time. Yeah, you're there. A lot of PowerPoints, a lot of doctor's appointments. A lot of medical stuff to go through. This. Can you still hear? Can you still see? Can you still go to the bathroom? All these other things. And at that point in time, for those who don't know, as civilians, they give you an option to get treated there for it and stay there even longer.
Yep.
Or you can make the mistake that we all make and just sign the paperwork and say, I'll go get treated at the VA.
That's exactly what we all did.
Because all you want to do is go the home.
Yeah, exactly.
After everything you just went through, all you want to do is just go home. And it is it's a bad system.
It is. And in retrospect, it's just like it was bad. and I don't think the VA nor the military was prepared with that influx of soldiers coming home who actually had issues.
No, not that at all. No. Now towards deployments are treated a little bit differently, but yeah, I mean, I remember how many things I signed away after my first deployment. Nope, I'll go to the VA. Nope, I'll go to the VA.
Yeah, exactly.
And 15, 20 years later, it's like I'm still dealing with these issues that I should have had checked out back then. And it's a much more arduous process going through the VA. So there is that. I'm talking about, all right, so after you get done at Fort Dix, does anything happen that I'm missing out here?
No, all good.
So why I said that? So when you get back to your guard unit, they leave you alone for 90 days.
You got 90 days basically of not having to deal with the guard.
Right. Welcome home. We'll leave you the hell alone. Is that when this all starts to hit you?
Oh yeah. Out of nowhere, it was extreme anger. Just not being able to switch it off, and I mean that combat mind, that hypervigilance, very aggressive towards any situation where, we're taught in the military that, speed, surprise, violence of action, right? And it's like it comes home with you, right? Without you really realizing it, where you go 0 to violent in like that, snap of a finger. And it like, after a while, I started to realize that this can't be normal. I mean, I was punching holes in walls. I was really angry, and wasn't processing why I was so angry. My little sister would come downstairs to check on me. She, and I don't even remember this, but she told me she came down. So I was living at home. So she came down to our basement at the time. It was a fully furnished basement. It was like my own apartment type thing. She came downstairs and to check on me, because for some reason it was in the middle of the night. She came downstairs to check on me, and she said I was sitting up on my bed just staring at the wall. And I don't even remember that. And she actually had to snap me out of it, took me to the living room and we just watched TV. I don't even remember any of that. But that's her memory of me coming home, was that eerie, look on my face in the middle of the night, just staring at a blank wall.
1,000-yard stare.
Yeah.
Is there anything about, the QRF incident with Mallard that, that starts to overcome? I mean, it's as simple as, hey, we'll go left, you go right, and you have a completely different set of results.
Yeah. And that's where that survival skill, right? And that question, even to this day, even with some of the other soldiers I've seen get killed, but this specific one was, home, our battalion. It was always like, because he had a family at the time. I was single, not married, no kids, nothing like that. I was a young E5 sergeant, just whatever. He had a family, kids, all that. And it was, I remember I used to volunteer for really dangerous things because of that reason. So that way guys with families don't have to do it, where, one of them was, we did this convoy security with the detainees. They were riding in regular buses. Soldiers had to be assigned to the buses. It was not even up armored, nothing. It was just the Iraqi buses. And, I raised my hand and say, hey, I'll take one of the buses. And they wouldn't let me because, again, my mission was different. I had to be upfront with the recon team, making sure that the route's cleared. But that was sort of my mindset, where I'm like, God damn, this guy with a family and kids died and I'm still here. Why is that? Why did that happen? And most people would say, well, that's your guardian angel, or you have another purpose or whatever. And no matter what, it still leads me to that same question to this day, is why couldn't it have been me? And I'm sure I know a lot of other soldiers and Marines that I've spoken to over the years who had similar occurrences that also question why it wasn't them, and that's that real survivor's guilt and that drive that drove me to become, go in the honor guard, honor soldiers that died overseas, because I felt it incumbent on me to honor them in that way. And that's also the drive that pushes me today, no matter what, is because I'm doing the things that they can't do, or they couldn't do, or they would want me to do, kind of like in their honor.
The only thing I can come up with in reference to the question of why is I lived through this myself, but you certainly understand the randomness of combat is impossible to figure out. I've said it. You could do everything right and still have a bad result, and you could do 1,000 things wrong and still end up walking away without a scratch. I don't have an answer for you. There is no preset determined outcomes in combat, mostly because one, shit never goes the way you plan, and two, the enemy has a say. I mean, it's just what it boils down to. You hope that your plan is good. You hope that your plan is flexible. You hope that your training is good and you react the right way and you do what all those things are what you hope for. In fact, I prayed for him every time. Just let me do what I was trained. Let me not have that moment of self-doubt or insecurity or whatever that would cause me to pause in a moment when I was supposed to react. The amount of control you have in combat is next to zero, other than when you pull the trigger and who you aim the gun at. Beyond that, a whole lot of different factors. That's the only thing I can come up with. I mean, it's trite, but it's just a matter of the fact. And for all of us who did survive and come out unscathed, compared to those who didn't and aren't, there's not an easy answer as to why, but there is I guess it wasn't meant for me, kind of just, it's as simple as that. Like, it wasn't meant for me, and in certain cases, look, there are certain days you sit there and think that I would trade a physical wound for all the mental wounds.
Yeah.
Because I can adjust, right?
Yeah. 100%.
We've seen the amount of soldiers who have come back and overcome prosthetics and missing limbs and fingers and eyes and sight and ears, whatever it may be, and yes, there's a million mental things that go along with that, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you're not injured, you're sort of rationalization is, well, I can adjust much better than what I can't turn my brain off.
Yeah. That's 100% accurate. That's the thing that again, like you said, I would trade a freaking give me a prosthetic type of thing versus what goes on in my head every single day, all the time, things that I think about, things that I saw or did. And it's like, I'd rather have that physical wound.
Is there a mental picture that stays with you the most from that day in September?
Just his body and that big body part that I grabbed, those are the only two things that really stick with me.
Flashback still?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing where, drinking never helps. I've had to overcome that too. Especially realizing and going through therapy and doing the stuff I should have been doing way back when, doing it now. They become a lot less frequent, or a lot more frequent, a lot less frequent, because I'm able to recognize when they're about to happen, or how I'm feeling, or why I'm feeling it, this way, that way. The flashback isn't as extreme as it used to be.
Yeah. So you mentioned a moment ago that you decided that your path in the Guard was going to now move to the Honor Guard.
Yes.
Take through that decision. And I know you mentioned obviously it was in reference to what had happened, but let's talk this out emotionally. What are you hoping to achieve by being part of the crew that honors the fallen?
To be that support for the family who lost that soldier, to cater to whatever needs they had, especially during the funeral and during the wake and all that stuff. And one of the biggest things that stood out for me from the Honor Guard is none of us wore our name tags, our name tapes, on our dress blues. And I asked the Master Sergeant why. I said, why don't, because at the time I didn't understand. I said, why don't we wear that? And he said, it's not about me or you, it's about the fallen and the family. And I took that to heart. I'm like, that's 100% accurate. I was like, it's not about the Honor Guard, it's about honoring them.
The person you're giving the flag to doesn't care what your name is, because they're not there.
Exactly.
And to even sort of distract them sort of, takes away from the reason why you're there. Now, again, I'll play devil's advocate here. I've been through several of those memorials downrange. And that was enough for me to know I don't need to be doing this back home. Like this was enough. It was enough to rip your guts out once.
Yeah.
Again. And I would hope that I never, and I prayed that I would never have to go to any more of these things. Watching guys in uniform just lose it and break down and cry that you never thought would do that, is something that sort of stayed with me, at least.
Yeah.
Look over and you're like, that's that infantry ranger guy over there who is, looks like he eats nails for breakfast. And now he's a puddle of mud. He's a puddle of mush.
Yeah.
And for me, and this is just Mark, I couldn't handle that on a day in, day out basis. And I've had people on this show who have done that. They've been part of those details that have done it for the same reason you did. And you're cut from a different cloth than me. I give credit for it, but it's just, there's only so much sadness I could take before it starts to make me sad,
Yeah. I mean, for me, the toughest detail is always when you're there folding the flag. That was always the toughest, because being part of the 21 gun salute, you're off in the distance. You're not hearing the cries or seeing the emotion. You're just, you're in the distance doing that. But when I got assigned to be one of the flag folders, I didn't realize how tough it was going to be until I did my first one. And it was a young soldier out of in Massachusetts, Belchertown, Massachusetts, who died. He was 19 years old when he was killed in Iraq. And I was assigned to be, the guy on the looking at the casket. I was on the left, front left. So, I was one of the guys doing each fold, each crease, making sure that it's nice and taut. And that day it was downpouring rain, right? And you know as well as I do, actually folding the flag in the rain is even harder because of the material and all that. So it took us a little longer than it should have because of the rain. But as I'm folding, you're hearing mom, brother, dad bawling their eyes out. I mean, it was tough, but I kept saying in the back of my head, doing it for him, doing it for them, like, let me do it right, and kind of keep my emotions in check. And after, obviously with the rest of the honor guard, we kind of, on the ride home, that's when we kind of like, let that exhale out and be like, man, that was tough, to do that. Because, after the 21 gun salute, after the trumpet, the flag folding is the quietest moment of the entire thing. And it was the toughest, every time I got assigned that detail, it was tough every time.
Did you ever have to present a flag?
No, that was the the master sergeant was the one, at the front of the casket. I just hand it off to him, and typically we'd have a general there or a full bird who presents the flag to the family.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want that job either, for the record.
No. Yeah.
Did you ever become desensitized to any of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, we were laughing earlier about Anaconda and the mortars and everything. You just all of a sudden were like, all right, cool. Let's do this again.
Does that make it lose its value if you're desensitized to it?
So it's funny you said that's when I left the honor guard, is when I felt that, all right, now I'm just going through the motions. Especially if there's no real, and at the time we weren't getting, which is a good thing, not getting a lot of young vets who were killed. Exactly. And it was more like older veterans or,
right.
Natural cause.
Different.
Natural cause deaths, and they wanted military honors, and that was fine. And so to me, I was like, yeah, we're doing a lot more of these older, like to me, you still value honor the veterans before us, no matter what. But to me, it was more like, yeah, I was there for that 19-year-old, though. I was there for that 20-year-old young kid, who was killed overseas. And that's what I wanted to dedicate the time to. So as the months and years go by, we started doing more of the older generation. And I was like, yeah, now it's starting to lose its why for me.
This is ultimately the end of your military career.
Yeah.
How do you come to that conclusion?
Well, so we were getting ready to mob again back to Iraq. We got our second set of orders that we were going back. So going through the motions of, pre-mob, going to the medics, this, that, the other. And one of the medics, so I was doing like Tylenol with codeine because of my back. I ended up hurting it overseas. And which, surprise, surprise, if you've been to combat, you're going to have some sort of physical injury too, The medic felt that I'm no longer good enough and sent me to the med board. And the med board decided to just medically discharge.
Did
and
you
I
want to go back? Were you like,
oh yeah,
about it? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to go back because it's kind of weird. It's not like, what was that in like Black Hawk Down? I'm not a war junkie. It's not about that. It was what I saw. So what happened was the 102nd Field Artillery National Guard unit was disbanded and put into history because it was the oldest field artillery regiment in the country, dating back all the way to the Revolutionary War. So they disbanded it and kind of put it in the history book. So the whole unit kind of got separated to all the different other units. Wherever you want to go, you get reclassed, all that good stuff, whatever. So I didn't really know where to go. I wanted to find a unit that was going to all right, what unit is going overseas next? And I found out there was this MP unit, 972 MP. They were getting ready to go to Iraq. I'm like, you know what?
I've
whatever.
done the MP before.
I've done the MP thing. So okay, let's do that. So went to that unit. Introduced the commander. Commander again realized I spoke Arabic, and he's like, I got a lot of work for you. So good to go. And as I was with that unit, I realized there were so many privates that are out of basic that have no freaking idea what combat is.
Yeah.
Right. And I felt as an NCO, it's kind of my duty to get these guys ready for what they're about to experience and see and do, and potentially have to fire their weapon. And I felt that as one of the more veteran combat vets in that unit, I needed to be there for them. And I trained my squad hard, and every time we trained, I would I'd randomly ask them, 9-line medevac, go. And if they didn't get it, guess what they're doing? They're pushing, or I'm having them do some other detail to get them in that mindset. Because I think the one thing with the guard is, as well, that once your weekend is done, kind of goes out the window and you're back at your regular job or whatever. To me, it changed, right? After experience what I experienced at war. Like, no, the guard, we're deploying every other year. You need to still keep that combat readiness up, and I felt that it was very important for me to be there for these young soldiers that had no clue what they were going through. And I'll never forget one young private, not knowing any better. We were just kind of shooting the shit, and he goes and he says, "Oh, why did one of the guys? Oh, why did you join? Well, what made you join? Oh, I just want to go kill Hajis." And man, the look that I gave him and some of the other veteran combat vets gave him must have kind of ignited a couple of the specialists to take him aside and correct his action and correct his words. Yeah. And that's when I think that kid even realized, like, oh shit, like, yeah, these guys are there's no joke, and these combat vets have a certain level of experience that we don't have.
Yeah. Well, and after you go through combat once, you realize it's not I want to kill Hajis. It's like I want to survive and take care of my people. The
Exactly.
results that bear out after that are sometimes out of my control, but
exactly.
It's more about surviving and protecting than it is about killing. And
yeah.
Well, again, youth is inexperience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I felt. I felt it's incumbent on me and some of the other combat vets to be there for these guys that just don't know.
So when you find out you're getting med boarded, are you upset, angry, mad?
Oh yeah, I was pissed off, depressed, just everything hit me at once. Especially when the letter comes in the mail and you read it said medically discharged. I was like, what the F? Like, I was like, really? And in my head, I was thinking it was like anger, betrayal, everything came out. I'm like, I'm a like, not patting myself on the back or anything, but I'm like, dude, I'm a veteran. I'm a combat vet that they're just willing to toss out. And they have these brand new guys and even brand new NCOs that haven't seen combat yet. And they have no idea what they're doing. And you're kind of casting aside. And it wasn't just me. There was a lot of combat vets that I've learned over the years that did get medically discharged because they had injuries or whatever. And they felt the same thing. I'll never forget. I met a guy actually last year. I was up at Yellowstone, just, on vacation with my family. And I met a guy who was part of the 82nd. And he was med boarded too. And he gave me the story almost similar to mine. And even him, he was med boarded in 2009, I think it was. He told me, and he felt the same way I did. Like, really? Because of these, injury, whatever, you felt that now we're, essentially broke and we can't be part of the Army anymore. So there was a lot of emotions that came through me.
Yeah, that just means you needed to be a better liar and not.
Yeah, right.
That's all that. Which again is a double-edged sword because again, I hit 24 years next month, and the things that I lied about are coming back to haunt me. And there's a part of me that wishes that I hadn't, that I had addressed my back issues, that I had gone to go look at certain things and 4 surgeries and everything later. My body, feels like it's betraying me at this stage of my life. And, that's the trade-off, right? And it's not easy. It's not, anything that, I don't think you're right for one or wrong for the other. These are individual choices that we all make, and we'll decide whether they're the right ones and the wrong ones in our own view. Easy way to do it. Now, let me ask you, in reference to, so when you find out you're getting med boarded, does that in any way impact the survivor's guilt you're dealing with?
Oh yeah, because to me, my mission wasn't done. I like, to me, I saw death. I looked at death right in the face. And one of the medics, a friend of mine, he put it perfectly while we were overseas. He said, damn, we play a game with a game of chess with death every day. We go outside that wire. Said, yeah, it's whatever piece we move, that could be the checkmate, no matter what. And to me, that survivor's guilt is just that. It literally represents that, moving that one piece that caused that checkmate.
Mm-hmm. How much time elapses before you really start to tackle this the way it appropriately needed to be addressed?
Ooh, no, we'll say 5 years ago, actually. Memorial Day 5 years ago, I had a incident really bad. Like that's when it was like, you know what? I need to do something about this. I can't be like this.
Would you like to elaborate on the incident?
It was nothing crazy, but it was that moment of reflection to be like, you know what? Because, well, what it was, I met up with a bunch of friends, and then there were active duty Marines that were in Boston on leave. We were all at a bar together. One of the Marines just became an NCO, and it was myself, another combat vet who was part of Deuce 4 up in Mosul. And they strike a brigade, and they've seen all kinds of stuff and done all kinds of things. And we were just talking NCO to NCO with him, and one thing led to another, and then all these memories between the both of us kind of flooded us. And again, that's the whole thing. Like, alcohol and war memories don't work well together. And it was at that moment where I had that crystallizing moment where I was like, I'm pissed again. I can't be this way. This can't be my go-to every time. And after that, I actually got serious about therapy, versus going to the VA and getting your rainbow pills and that's about it. No, let's really dig into what's going on. And it's when I started my therapy, it was one of those things where you think you're taking one step forward, but then you feel like you're taking 3 steps back, because whatever emotions you had bottled up are now really coming out, and you're like, holy crap.
Say it 1,000 times over. Some days I wish I never opened Pandora's box. It was comfortable. It was good where it was. And
yep.
I had it nicely decorated, and I never needed to bother with it until you needed to bother with it. And you bother with it. You realize that the box only looks good on the outside. And so you struggle, with going back and forth. Should I have ever even started this process? Because some days it doesn't feel like it's ever going to improve.
Yeah.
But I will say, shoulder to shoulder, brother to brother. I'm glad you were able. Even doesn't matter how long it took. It took me better part of 15 years. It doesn't matter. You're here, and you're pushing forward, and you're doing the right thing and taking care of you. And look, all this stuff it's a trickle down effect. It'll affect your spouse, your kids, your family life, friends, your loved ones. I mean, you don't realize the impact and the reach that it has until you truly start to understand what you're feeling and going through. Because, not that I've ever been through a 12-step program, but, it's one of the things where it's just like you don't realize how many people it touches.
Yeah.
You're just so insular, and you have such tunnel vision about what you're thinking and feeling that it has a much wider swath than you give it credit for. So I give credit to you for having the courage to finally do this, because you could have kept banging your head into a wall and probably functioned fairly normal for the rest of your life, and nobody would have been wiser. Now, you would have been feeling different, but nobody on the outside would have been the wiser.
And that's the thing. Us, combat vets, we're really good at masking it. Yeah. Really good. I got really good at, going through the day with this extreme anger, but never really letting it out. Right. You're just like, okay, it's kind of like one of those, like, you got this wolf, lion, whatever demon inside that just is itching to just get out and, take care of business the way it should, or it feels that it should. And it's a ticking time bomb, essentially, and we get really good at masking it. Even to this day, I get, I'm still really good at, okay, here we go, but really good at masking it. And like you said, you open up Pandora's box. It like I had emotions I never thought I had. Never thought.
Yeah. Feelings, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Best left unfelt, some people would say, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So you start dealing with all this stuff. I mean, listen, you wrote the column for Havoc Journal, which was, again, very well done. It's dated back on March 6th. So if you guys want to go check it out, just another perspective on everything that Ayman shared with me. But where are you now with all this stuff? I mean, how do you feel you're progressing, or are we still struggling? Or are we still on the first couple of steps? Have we moved along?
No, I'm actually, in a really good spot where, I'm not seeing my therapist weekly. Now it's monthly. And that's how I know I'm doing better and better. Because at first it was weekly, it was twice a week. Sometimes it was 3 times a week. Because, the therapist, and it was at the VA, and the therapist felt that I needed that, which kind of told me the gravity of my situation. I'm like, oh, really? And it got to the point where the conversation of me going away for a while is an option too. And I'm like, really? Am I that bad? But then she's like, no, it's not that you're never bad. It's just, I want to put options in front of you of what we can do to help. So to me, I'm like, well, in my head, I was still like, man, I am that bad, but at first I told her, well, let's see how I do. And then we'll decide. And, later on, if I really need to go somewhere for a couple of weeks or a month or whatever.
So I know that you were medically discharged in 2008, but when does Hybrid Wolf Blue Line Strategies come about? I mean, what did you do after? I mean, obviously you're in the Guard, you have a civilian job somewhere, right? So
yeah, I became a So I became a cop, and the reason was, again, it's that feeling of needing a purpose, right? I mean, when we come back home, it's like I remember I was sitting in an office. I used to work at a doctor's office. I was doing psychology degree, all this stuff. And I was sitting there answering phones when I, finally after like almost 5 month vacation, I go back to work, and I'm sitting there and I'm answering phones. And I'm hearing some of the stupidest complaints I've ever heard in my life. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. I mean, I was just doing freaking combat ops for a year or so, and I'm sitting here listening to mommy isn't getting along with daughter, and daughter needs a therapist as a result. I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. And that's when I decided to become a cop, and kind of reignited that purpose in me.
Good. Okay, so then when does your own company come about?
So I've been a cop for almost 18 years now, and it came about because I see such a huge gap in training within the law enforcement community, where there's some key missing elements in the training of law enforcement. And I go back to, I always say this to even like I'm a range instructor, I'm a firearms instructor, and I do instructions all over the state and the country. And I always say the same thing. I said, in the military, when the military gives you a piece of equipment, you study that piece of equipment until it becomes ingrained in you. And then after you study it, now you perform with it in rain, cold, sleet, extreme stress, all that stuff, to make sure that now it's in your head, that it becomes automatic, when you react or when you do your thing. In policing, it's not that at all, so in policing, it's just, here's your firearm, here's a week with it, and that's it, or anything. Here's, some defensive tactics. We'll do it for a couple of weeks. All right, you're good now. They're just a lot of check the box type training. That I also saw some similarities to that. Like, they all of a sudden, law enforcement took the approach of the Army, death by PowerPoint. Let's do everything by PowerPoint and just check the box, say that we did that training. Like, to me, that isn't the way to do it. And to me, so what I ended up doing with Hybrid Wolf is in one of my articles, I actually write the philosophy of Hybrid Wolf. It's just that, you have sheepdogs, you have the wolf, and then you have the guy in between, the hybrid wolf. And I've always felt sheepdogs have their place because they do a great job. They're out there, they respond to threats appropriately, do what they got to do. The hybrid wolf hunts the threats.
Right.
Right. So I've always been the guy who, throughout my law enforcement career, I've had the privilege of working undercover, working in some pretty high speed task force type units that we hunt. We're not just waiting for the 911 call, to get us moving. We're actually out there hunting and getting the bad guy before the murder happens or before the terrorist threat or whatever it might be, So to me, that's the hybrid wolf, though. He's that guy or girl, even girl, that is just ready, always training, always dedicating their time in the profession the way they should be, kind of like, with SF and Rangers and some other units that I had the fortune, being very fortunate to work with, just very disciplined and dedicated to the job, right? And that's the hybrid wolf, that's that guy. He's the one in between, and he's always the one where I even say this, like, in a 100-man department, and how many do you think are proactive? And cops laugh and they're like, yeah, maybe 10%. I'm like, exactly. 10% of the department is actually doing real police work, while 90% is sitting around collecting the paycheck. And what hybrid wolf is kind of tapping into that real training of stress inoculation that we've done in the military. And now I'm bringing it to the law enforcement side. Now, SWAT teams, gang units, like we all do that, the stress inoculation, because we have to be at that high speed ready, tip of the spear sort of work. But I'm bringing it more to the everyday patrol officer. And that's what Hybrid Wolf essentially is, the company I created.
Gotcha. Strange question. You have any connection to the Boston Marathon bomber guys, finding them and everything else?
SWAT team.
SWAT team? Okay.
Yeah, SWAT team.
That was that area. So, and everything you were just speaking about lends to those are the dudes that went to find that guy.
Guys. That was all. So during that time, there was about 10,000 SWAT operators in Watertown hunting those guys, and a lot of the guys who are combat vets, the SWAT guys who are combat vets, did not stop till mission was over, and that's just the way we are. Like, you don't go home back to bed. I mean, I remember in Iraq, I've done operations where it was like 24 to 26 hours straight, and you know how it is. You take your sleep when you can, whether it's a 5 minute, like 2 seconds, you close your eyes and you're like, okay, I'm back, and you just go do the job, or you eat, I used to eat the Folgers grounds from MREs or Tabasco in the eye or whatever, to keep me awake. But that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to do the Red Man and Marlboro.
Yep, there you go.
I used to do the twofer.
Yep, when you're smoking a cigarette and chewing tobacco at the same time, you need to be awake.
Yeah, exactly.
Dentist favorite patient. There we go.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mentioned at the top, and I wanted you to be able to talk about it. You're in the process of writing a book, Resolute Path.
Yeah.
Give me the background on it and
yeah.
why.
So I was talking to Charlie, from Havoc,
Yep.
and I told him because he has a foundation, Second Mission Foundation, that helps veteran entrepreneurs, book writers, stuff like that, where he helps them get stuff published and all that. So I was talking to him and I said, hey, Charlie, what do you think if I take all the articles I've written? Because I guess I didn't know this, but I guess I've written close to 100 articles and I'm one of the top writers in Havoc. I had no idea. And I was like, what if I take all of that and turn it into a book and expand on everything, in that book? And he said, that's a great idea. And at the time, I didn't realize that, Second Mission also publishes books, how it does the publishing. So, and I was like, all right, I mean, do you know any, I know, you probably know, do you know any publishers or editors? He's like, yeah, me. I'm like, really? I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm like, oh, perfect. All right, then let's get started. So it's pretty much done, actually. It's on the final stages for print. We're looking at the second week in April for it to come out, like print out, going to go. And the reason why Resolute Path, like I picked that title, is just the story about, yes, it's a story about me growing up in war-torn countries, coming home, going back to war, and what that was like. And you know, and I said in the book, I said, this is not about the Ayman Kafel war story. I said, this is about finding your path and being resilient, whatever your path is, you know, whether you want to start a business, you want to do this, you do want to do that. This is what this book's about. It's about being resilient throughout your life. And, you know, I gave the reason why I wanted to do it like in that stance with my articles, because in my articles, I do talk a lot about that, whether it's law enforcement and militaries. I do talk about, you know, pushing through and doing the job and doing what you have to do. And that's essentially what the book is. It's kind of like a guide, so to speak, for others, especially, you know, struggling veterans, you know, brother, sister, struggling veterans, or even struggling law enforcement, to be like, you know, just like Charlie says, find your second mission, or find your resolute path, and just go.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it, man. I'll absolutely get it as soon as it comes out. Again, check out the article on Havoc Journal that Ayman wrote. It's worth it, and trust me, the pictures will bring a lot of what you said together. If you need any more clarification, whether you're watching on a YouTube channel, or even just listening anywhere you get the podcast, go check out and go look at the pictures, and you'll get a deeper appreciation for everything that Ayman had to say. Look, thank you so much for taking the time to share more of this. You know, your words,
absolutely.
Your words, what was it? 300, 500 words, 1,000 words, maybe in that.
Yeah, 1,000 words.
I mean, they were so impactful, enough for me to want to tell the deeper version of this story in a much longer form. And I thank you for sharing it with me, because sometimes this stuff isn't easy, man. No matter how many times you peel the Band-Aid off and look at the wound, sometimes the Band-Aid sticks a little bit harder, and it grabs a little bit more of the scab or the skin. Yep. You get the whole metaphor. It's just, it's never easy, but I thank you. And listen, you know, best of success in your personal journey, and continued luck and good fortune, and keep grinding away at it, man. We'll be whole again one day. We're a new whole. But it doesn't ever, you know, it's a journey, not a destination, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish you the best of luck with that, and best of luck with Resolute Path, the book. Again, check it out, and of course, they can get in touch with you if they wanted to. And Hybrid Wolf Blue Line Strategies, you Google it, you'll find it. It's easy to find. But again, man, honesty, compassion, empathy, all that, you exuded it all, brother. I certainly appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Mark, anytime. And also, same brother to brother, you know, we're cut from the same cloth. And, you know, we're just, like you said, it's a journey.
Absolutely is. Ayman Kafel, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
All right, thanks, bud.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.